going to show you the easy way to change all 8 of the grids in a top manifold filter. And the first thing you want to do is get the size of your filter. You can either take a grid into the store, or when they install the filter they should punch a hole and let you know what size it is. I can tell by looking at it myself, but you definitely want to get the right size grids that go in there. Okay, here's what you're going to need for the job. You're going to need a bag of diatomaceous earth. You're going to need to buy the grids. I buy it by the kit. So this is the universal grid, 60 square foot. It's a 7+1 partial grid kit. You're also going to need a high pressure nozzle to clean the filter off. I'll show you that in a minute. You'll need a stem O-ring for the stem pipe. You'll need some either silicone lube or magic lube for the tank O-ring and also for the stem pipe when you replace that O-ring. You'll need a wrench to get the filter clamp off, and you'll need a various wrench to get the bolt on the top manifold off, depending on what type of filter you have. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do is turn on the filter and charge it up, and then let the air out of the air release. I'll turn everything off. Okay, we'll turn the system back off. I'm going to get the bolt off of the filter. Okay, I'm going to get the spring barrel nut off here. Get the bolt off the filter. I'm going to get the clamp completely off and drop it down to the ground. Next what we're going to do is we're going to open the backwash valve up. We're going to also open up the pressure relief valve. By doing that, you'll create back pressure. You should be able to push the tank right off and break the seal. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get the lid off here. Put it somewhere safe. Okay, so I'm going to show you the easy way to do this. I'm going to do changing all the grids inside the tank. So we're going to have to clean the tank off right now and hose off these existing grids. Get in there and hose this off really good. Okay, so that's pretty good to start with, and we can do some more hosing off as we start putting the new grids in the filter. If you have an FNS Plus like this, the bolts on top are 7/16. There's some older ones that have kind of lock nuts, but this newer ones have these bolts. I'm going to take both of these off. And the rods should stay in there. They should be locked in the bottom manifold, so they shouldn't fall through. If you have a really old filter, they may move. I've had that happen before. So I'm going to take these off and put them in a safe place. And the reason I'm doing all 8 in this one is I've replaced a couple here and there, and they're all starting to kind of leak. So it's better if I just replace all of them at once. They're all getting pretty old. I'm going to pull the top manifold off. I'll do this carefully by kind of wiggling it. And it should pull right off like that. You want to check it also for any kind of damage when you get it off. Close it off a little bit better right now. Get all the rest of the DE out of there. I'm going to open the box up and I'm going to actually take out the small parcel grid right now. I'll do this one first, and you can see that it's smaller than the other grids. Here's a regular size grid, and I'll do the partial grid first and I'll work my way around. Take the guide off also. Just slides right up. If you have an older filter, you may not have the guide, or a different brand may not come with that. And of course the stem O-ring looks good. I changed it last time when I replaced one of the grids in here, but that's still good. I'll just lube it up before I put the top manifold back on. If you notice it missing or loose, you definitely want to replace it. The partial grid is set right next to the stem pipe. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this one out. And you may see some DE in there. I'm going to go ahead and hose all that off the bottom. Again, I didn't do an initial good cleaning. I just did a quick rinse, and I'm going to go ahead and get the rest as I do the grids here. You can see where this one fits in the tracks. You can see the grooves in the bottom manifold. So I'm going to slide this one in. The tracks there. Okay, and that one should set right there. I'm going to go ahead and take the next one next to it out. You can see that it's actually cracked on top a little bit. And you can see this is the grid that was actually causing the problem. It's got holes in it right here. So now I'll take the next one out. And I'll go ahead and drop in the next grid here. Again, you want to do it one by one, that way you don't lose your pattern. I'll go ahead and do the next one. I'm going to remove the next grid, and I'll do the same thing. Work my way around. Again, it fits in the slot on the bottom manifold. one out. I'll put this one in. Gotta go around the rod there, and it sits in there. Okay, and I'll do the next grid. We're still holding the pattern pretty good. A good way to know if you're getting this right is when you put the top manifold on. It should sit on there good, and it should be in the pretty good pattern. You should have it pretty accurate. I'm getting near the end here. I got 2 left. And I pulled the last 2 out so you can see the actual bottom manifold I'm talking about as far as the grooves here. You can see this is where you want to set the end of the grid, the tip of the grid. Right here, that needs to be set right on that spot, and then the rest of it goes into those notches there. We want to set the grid down right on that spot in the guide, bottom manifold. We want to put this last one in also the same way. And it should sit right down there in front of the stem pipe. So that's the pattern of all the grids. I'm going to put the top manifold back on. So that's the easy way to do it. I'm going to go ahead and put the guide on also. And the guide should be a good indicator if you got this close to the pattern on the bottom manifold. Hopefully your filter has a guide. If you have an older filter, it's much harder to do this, but the guide really comes in handy as far as getting everything lined up. And that's pretty close to where it should be. And it should look something like this when you got everything back in there. I'm going to put the top manifold on. I'm going to lube up the stem O-ring here. It doesn't stretch when I put the top manifold on. And on the top manifold there are notches that the grid sits into also, so make a note of that when you're putting it in. If you don't put it in the notch correctly, you could snap the grid. And this could be a little challenging in some cases, so I'm going to go ahead and show you how I do this. I'll slide them over the bolts first. This one has 2 bolts. Then I'll line it up with the stem pipe, and I'll kind of move the grids till they're just about underneath each of the areas they need to be. When you're putting this top manifold on, you want to make sure that the grids are actually in these grooves here that they lock into, otherwise it'll be difficult to get them lined up. So they got to actually, not only you have to get the top of the grids lined up, you have to get these inside the grooves of the top manifold. So you want to keep working on it. You want to kind of just fiddle with it until you have it all where you need it. Again, it's a little bit time consuming. There's really no trick to it, it's just a matter of lining everything up correctly. And then as it lines up, the manifold will start to push down on top of the grids themselves. Usually this grid is the problem here in front of the stem pipe. And then once you get them lined up, you can kind of tap it lightly. Kind of get it on there. You won't break the grids if you tap it lightly. Okay, lightly tap it down. Okay, so that's pretty good. And then when I get the bolts, I'll tighten the bolts up and it'll actually bring it down a little more snug on here. You know that they're on there snug. You don't want any of this showing on top. And you can see that it's all on there pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and tighten it down. And by doing this, it'll actually bring it down tighter on top of the grids. And while you're doing this, if you hear any kind of cracking noise, you know that you have the grid off alignment and you're actually snapping one inside the manifold. So be aware of that. If you hear any kind of snapping noise, that's not normal. And you probably have the grid off alignment and it's cracking inside the manifold here. You also want to push down on this part to make sure things are good before you tighten everything back up. And that should be on there good. You don't want any kind of gaps here on this. So I'm going to lube up the O-ring and get everything back on. Of course, check to make sure the O-ring is in good shape. I'm going to put it on with an old O-ring. It'll start leaking here. Got the clamp and the bolt on. Tighten it up. Yeah, this is your type of filter. Make sure you have the bolt on. There's no gaps in the spring at all. Make sure the air relief is closed. I'll leave the backwash open for a minute and I'll backwash real quick. Turn everything on here. Give it a little bit of a backwashing to get any of the residual earth out of the bottom. Okay, we'll turn that off. I'll go ahead and close the backwash valve. Turn everything back on. You want to open the air release to let the air out of the filter. Once water shoots out, we'll close it off. Drip the filter and check for leaks. I'll put 1 scoop in. I'll walk over to the return line and see if anything is coming back in. And here's the return jet, and everything looks good. And so that looks good, so I'm going to charge it up completely now. And so that's the easy way to replace all of the 8 grids in a top manifold filter.